Shabbat Shalom and welcome, everybody. What a blessing it is to see all of your beautiful faces. And I welcome everyone who's able to join us here on the Zoom and everyone who's watching both now and who will be with us watching the recording later. It's really incredible that technology is allowing us to find our way to be with one another today and to celebrate both moments of grief and moments of joy, to lift them up together and to find our way to each other. Before we hear some words of Torah from our special guest this morning, I want to just address what I know is on many people's minds this morning, which is that I'm sure that many of you heard that that yesterday afternoon, the president ordered the reopening of religious institutions for prayer. Said that the services that we have together are not only important, but they are essential. And therefore, we should be gathering in person again. And I want to tell you that I very much believe that what we do together is not only important, but is also essential. I want to tell you that the most incredible, richest, most powerful spiritual and religious experiences that I have not been while hiking Half Dome, but have been while standing in between Hillel Tigay and Ross Levinson, surrounded by 1,000 or 2,000 of you, all of us lifting our voices and opening our hearts in prayer and singing together with all of our might. But we will not return to pray together in person until it is safe for us to do so, until we are told by public health officials, by scientists, and by doctors that it is safe, and by coming together, we will not be endangering one another's lives. We will not come together when we are told by someone who has displayed open disdain for both science and faith that we should join together, but instead when we know that we can do so as an expression of love for one another and for the Holy One, and as an expression of our shared responsibility to the broader community. Because we know that in these days, we can't get exactly what we want. We can't do exactly what we want. And perhaps the greatest expression of our freedom is not to serve ourselves, but to figure out how to serve one another by doing what needs to be done in order to keep the most vulnerable among us safe. And our community will continue to do so. So as much as I don't like opening up a computer on Shabbat morning and seeing you by screen and not being able to hear the incredible harmony that I know is happening in each of our living rooms and back houses and garages around the city and around the country right now, we will continue to do so until we are assured that we can be safe and really mitigate against the greatest risks by coming together. So I thank all of you for finding a way toward one another, even in these very strange times. And even despite the awkwardness of the use of technology and all of its limitations, I see this as an incredible act of love, each of us showing that love to one another right now, because we're doing everything that we can to keep each other safe. Now, this morning, Rabbi LaBelle said that we have a special guest with us, and giving our Dvar Torah this morning is a dear friend and a member of our community, and someone who has worked every day and every night, not only over the past 2 months, but over the past many years, in order to do what he can to keep us safe and to keep us thriving as a city and as a community. And so I'm very pleased to introduce to you this morning for some words of Torah on Shabbat Bamidbar as we begin the book of Numbers, my friend, Mayor Eric Garcetti.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom and good morning, Rabbi Sharon. Thank you, Rabbi Lavelle and Hillel and everybody. I'm mostly just here for Hadar and her Bar Mitzvah, so I guess I can do something on the side if you want me to say a little about Torah. But Hadar, congratulations to you, the entire Harrington clan. I know what an amazing day it is on behalf of this City of Angels. Congratulations on this extraordinary day. I know we can't be with you in person, but we are so much with you in spirit, and this entire city wraps its arms of love around you. So I guess I have to now do a little bit of Torah commentary. I've never done it before. And Rabbi Sharon, for those of you who know, this is my community and my shul and a place that is my spiritual home and a place of justice and fairness and kindness. And whether she forces me to sing to you at the high holidays or whether it's this, she's really pushing my spiritual growth, and I appreciate that. And I Zoom is very hard. I know that David Light especially would rather be in the back schmoozing and drinking coffee. And, it's been very tough on you, David. I see you, I love you, and I look forward to you schmoozing in the back of services soon. But for all of us, this has really been such an amazing couple of months in every sense of that word. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Bamidbar, the beginning of the book of Numbers. And I know when I was 17 years old, I put on my senior page of the yearbook a cliche that probably approximately 12% of you did, quoting Winston Churchill, saying this is not the end, it is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. And I hadn't quoted that again till about 2 weeks ago when I was doing my nightly address to the city. And I said, now as we were ending this moment when we actually had collectively embraced each other and done the work to save and preserve lives, that we are now maybe at the beginning, the end of the beginnings, and starting to go into this transition of a new moment. But I want to return us back to Egypt for a moment, back to where we were at the beginning of this. And this Torah portion, it says on the first day of the second month in the second year, following the exodus from the land of Egypt, God spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. We're so good at counting, whether it's the size of the ark or the number of the days. And here we are on what I call day 71 of this new life that we've been living, this moment and this wilderness that we are in. But if we go back to the beginning of it, we think about, remember when there was this run on the food in the markets, when we didn't know and people were panicking, like what would happen? People were talking about violence in the streets, and people couldn't get the most basic things from toilet paper to bread. And, as we look ahead now and what we see where we are in this wilderness, it's just as the Israelites who found manna delivered from heaven, that manna is this incredibly revered thing in our people's tradition. Back then, if you look back, it was probably no treat. It was either a miracle and or a secretion from the trees or the insects that were on the desert plants. It's this sweetish, oily mixture of food. But it was so important that Aaron, who was Moses's brother and spokesperson, and he was commanded to put manna in a jar next to the Holy of Holies. And Jeremiah, centuries later, when people weren't worshiping and weren't practicing, took the jar out to show that this manna was still there, the testament of what God had given us at our toughest moments. But here in Numbers, there's so many things that we could talk about in this parsha. I could talk to you about the census that God commanded of the Jews. And if you haven't filled out your census, you got to do it. I could talk to you about the building of the tabernacle, and why, as we wandered, would we build a tabernacle? Was it for ourselves? Or as the Malbim said, God didn't need a temple for him on earth. He needed a sanctuary within our hearts so that we could be a sanctuary for him. But I'm not going to talk about those things. I want to talk instead about this moment and this in-between and the sense of longing for what was and what comes. In Numbers, it says that the Israelites talked about what they missed about Egypt, this place where they had literally been slaves, that they missed the cucumbers and they missed the watermelon, they missed the leeks, they missed the onion, as they just ate this manna that was delivered to them each day. They missed the flavor, and they missed, even in their own oppression, the familiar. They hungered for food, of course, but they hungered also for the past. And later on in here, and it's interesting, this book is about 40 years. Quarantine comes from the same number. Quarantine was a 40-day time when if you were sick, you had to be kept away from everybody. So 40 years and 40 days. But it led to rebellion. In this time when we were in the desert, it wasn't peaceful. It was full of passion and rebellion. And at one point, people said, I miss the meat. I want meat. And God delivered to them quails, more quails than they could possibly eat. And they just ate them all and engorged themselves on it. But then God not only delivered those quails, he struck them down, reminding them, I can feed you and I can kill you. And we look at that in nature right now, which is that we can see food come from this country and we can distribute it to those who need it. And we can see also this virus, which can take the life, things beyond us. And so we have this contradiction in Numbers. I've been obsessed my whole life with the crossing of borders, the idea of cultural borders and boundaries and the in-between. I'm the product of a Mexican-American father and a Jewish mother. And for me, the in-between has always been where I've been comfortable. But there's a lot of fear that comes from that in-between. The story of the Jews is, why did it take 40 years for an 8-week walk? Why did we for so long? Why did God make us walk in the wilderness for so long? And in this moment, why? And how will we get through this moment when we're stuck in this wilderness? And every day people ask me, tell me the date when X will open. And I say, I don't know. I don't know. I can't tell you how many people will die 2 weeks from now, but 2 weeks from now, I can tell you how many people have died. And we can make decisions together. But people want the black and they want the white. They want to go back even to the slavery that they had because it's familiar, or they want the promised land so much that even this book itself spends most of its time on 2 years, the beginning and the end, and not the 38 years in between. But strangely enough, and this is where I'll kind of bring it home, this is where life is. Life is in the in-between. That old cliche about people's gravestones, that there's the beginning and the end, and then the dash, and the dash is everything. We go through it so quickly, and we want to get through it so quickly. We fear what comes, and yet also there's fear about the resolution. Think about this congregation. We've gone from a JCC to a gym to now Zoom, and I think I don't speak just for myself, that I fear us having a permanent home. I'm so glad that we do, but there's fear that comes from that, because what we've had in this wandering has been so brilliant and wonderful. I see too, when we talk to folks who are experiencing homelessness on the street, who once were housed, and we want to get them housed again, the fear that they have of leaving the wilderness, it in itself becomes the place suddenly that we embrace. And so as we look forward about where we will go and how we move out of this, the emptiness of this moment is where God speaks to us. We go to the desert because that's where Moses does receive the word of God, not in the promised land, not when we are oppressed, but in this moment. So this emptiness, I hope in this Shabbat, is something that we will embrace and ask the Holy One to help us be satisfied with the in-between. Help us to navigate these borders that we are crossing. Help us be grateful for the sustenance that we have, the manna from heaven that reminds us we have enough, but not to lust for too much. Help us remember the middle, which is life itself, the days that we are given, the struggles that we must understand, our rebellions and our hungers, and let us see what is before us. Chuang-Tzu, quoting Confucius in a conversation, talks about emptiness when a poor man talked to him about fasting. And he says, don't listen with your mind, listen with your spirit, because the spirit is empty and it waits on all things. Emptiness is the fasting of the mind. It is when we are empty and when we are confused and when we are wandering that God speaks to us and we find him in our hearts. And so in this Shabbat with so much unknown, don't look for the light, don't look for the shadows, live in the in-between, embrace the wilderness, because the promised land will come. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mayor. I'm so grateful to you. And I think you're exactly right. I think that this gray area, this great uncertain, is so excruciating to live in. And it's why, hello, Maya. It's why I'm so deeply grateful to you for your leadership. It's really hard to lead, even in the best of times, and to lead us through the gray is excruciating. And you have done it with grace and with incredible wisdom, and always guided by love for our city and love for fellow humanity. And I'm so grateful that we have a mayor that starts by quoting Churchill, goes to Jeremiah, cites the Malbim like that, you could miss it, and then goes to Confucius and brings it home with Maya sitting on his lap. We're so deeply grateful, and thank you for continuing to put our health and our safety and the fullness of our lives before you as you make these really critical decisions. We thank you and we bless you and your whole family. You should continue to stay safe and healthy. Our blessings.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I'll save your singing until the High Holy Days.